You've seen judges bang their gavels in anger, but what happens when one actually throws it at a witness? In this extraordinary courtroom confrontation, a respected royal guard faces off with an arrogant judge who shatters all bounds of judicial conduct. When Judge Thornton hurls his gavel across the courtroom, Lieutenant Harrison's lightning-fast reflexes transform the moment. The lieutenant's catch doesn't just spare him from injury, it inverts the power dynamic instantly. Watch as the wooden symbol of judicial authority becomes damning evidence in a criminal case against the very judge who wielded it moments before. If you enjoyed this jaw-dropping moment, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more thrilling Royal Guards drama. The morning light casts a golden glow across the steps of Westminster Crown Court, catching on the polished brass buttons that adorn Lieutenant Daniel Harrison's scarlet tunic. Each step he takes is deliberate, a vivid splash of royal red against the weathered gray stone of the building. The white belt cinched around his waist provides a stark contrast to his uniform, creating an almost theatrical appearance that draws the eyes of everyone in the vicinity. Harrison moves through the crowd with military precision, his 6'2" frame made commanding by the bearskin cap that adds nearly a foot to his height. The cool stone echoes beneath his measured footsteps as he parts the sea of black-robed legal professionals. Barristers clutch their briefs closer, their expressions mixing curiosity with discomfort at this unusual intrusion. "Never seen one of them in here before," mutters a clerk, the words hanging in the musty courthouse air. "What's a Queen's Guard doing in Crown Court?" Harrison's presence stands out precisely because it's extraordinary. Royal Guards typically remain at ceremonial posts protecting royal residences and attending formal state functions. Today, he serves as a witness in a routine burglary case, generating palpable curiosity throughout the building. At the security checkpoint, Harrison reveals himself beyond the tourist attraction image. He navigates the metal detectors with efficiency born from years of training. His expression remains neutral, his posture impeccable, skills developed through countless hours standing motionless while visitors test his famous composure. "ID, sir," requests the security officer, fingers lingering on the smooth, laminated card Harrison produces with a fluid motion, his white gloves making the simple action seem almost choreographed. Whispers follow him through the building. Court staff peer from doorways, and defendants momentarily forget their troubles to stare at this unusual intrusion of pageantry into their workaday world. The rough wool of his uniform, designed for palace gates, seems almost extravagant against the stark functionality of the legal corridors. Behind Harrison's composed face lies a mind as disciplined as his posture. Before joining the military, he graduated from Oxford with honors in law, a path he set aside for service while maintaining his legal credentials. The royal scarlet conceals not just a soldier, but a scholar, a duality that serves him well in both worlds, particularly in this environment governed by centuries of tradition. The oak-paneled courtroom awaits, its dark wood absorbing sound into hushed gravitas. Portraits of stern-faced former judges line the walls, their painted eyes seemingly following newcomers with judgmental intensity. Harrison notes the familiar demand for order as he makes his way to the designated seating area with economical movements. His gaze meets that of Judge Marcus Thornton, whose thin, wire-rimmed glasses perch on a sharp nose. The judge's expression shifts noticeably, eyes narrowing at the splash of royal scarlet entering his domain. From the gallery, hushed voices provide context to the visual tension. "That's Thornton," an elderly barrister whispers. "Brilliant legal mind, but watch yourself. He can be uncommonly cruel to those he considers beneath him." "I've heard he made a witness cry last month," comes the response. That was a qualified expert with 20 years' experience. Thornton reduced the testimony to rubble, then suggested a career change before leaving the stand. The stage is set for collision. Military discipline embodied in Harrison's perfect posture and ceremonial uniform faces judicial power, concentrated in Thornton's imperious gaze. Two forms of order, each accustomed to deference, each operating by different codes, about to intersect in a space where, traditionally, only one reigns supreme. What few in the courtroom realize is that symbols of authority can quickly transform into weapons. The polished wooden gavel resting before Judge Marcus Thornton seems innocent in its familiar prominence, yet carries the weight of centuries of judicial power. Within minutes, this modest tool will cross a boundary that separates proper judicial conduct from career-ending misconduct. Judge Thornton sits with ramrod posture, peering over thin, wire-rimmed glasses that slide down his nose. His perpetual frown carves deep lines between his eyebrows, an expression of permanent disapproval that has become his trademark after 2 decades on the bench. The black judicial robe drapes over his shoulders like armor, complementing his carefully cultivated aura of intellectual superiority. The proceedings begin with clockwork predictability. The prosecution presents evidence in the burglary case with practiced efficiency. Witnesses approach the stand, swear oaths, and retreat under Thornton's razor-sharp questioning. Yet something unusual disrupts the familiar rhythm of justice today. Thornton's legendary focus, his ability to recall minute details and spot inconsistencies, appears compromised. His gaze keeps drifting toward the splash of scarlet in the gallery. Each time Harrison shifts position, Thornton's attention snaps to the movement like a predator tracking prey. The judge's questions become disjointed, lacking their usual precision. He asks witnesses to repeat answers already given clearly, then interrupts before they can finish. The gavel sits prominently before him, its polished oak handle gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Thornton's fingers drift toward it repeatedly, tapping its head against the sound block, each strike like the ticking of a countdown clock. Every tap echoes through the chamber, asserting his dominance over the space. A witness describes the crime scene in detail, but Thornton barely registers the testimony. His focus remains fixed on Harrison's uniform, the medals, the perfect posture. The prosecutor and defense counsel exchange confused glances as the judge's distraction becomes increasingly apparent. The atmosphere grows increasingly tense. The air feels charged as Thornton's behavior deviates further from judicial ethics. His fingers drum faster against the bench, his jaw clenching visibly beneath his thinning gray beard. Without warning, Thornton holds up his hand, silencing the witness mid-sentence. The courtroom falls, instantly quiet. "Before we continue," Thornton announces, his voice carrying the practiced projection of decades on the bench, "I feel compelled to address a matter of courtroom decorum." Every head turns in unison toward Harrison's scarlet uniform. "You there in the costume," Thornton says, his tone dripping with disdain. "Explain your choice of attire in my courtroom." Harrison rises with military precision. "Lieutenant Daniel Harrison, Queen's Guard 3rd Battalion. I am on active duty and scheduled to report to my post following these proceedings." Thornton's lips curve into something between a sneer and a smile. "The Queen's Guard. Your ceremonial duties involve standing still while tourists take photographs. Why appear in full regalia rather than appropriate civilian clothes?" The prosecutor half rises. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Harrison is here as a witness, and his appearance is entirely—" "I did not ask for your input, counsel," Thornton snaps. His fingers now fully wrap around the gavel, gripping it like an extension of his will. The psychology of threatened authority plays out in real time. Thornton's defensive reaction manifests as increasing aggression. His control, previously absolute, seems threatened by the mere presence of another form of authority. "This courtroom operates under rules established over centuries," Thornton continues, his voice lowering. "Rules that the military feels entitled to disregard." The gavel's shadow stretches across his bench. Thornton's knuckles whiten around the handle. The physical embodiment of his authority, now poised to become something far more dangerous as 2 ancient systems of power collide in a space where traditionally only one reigns supreme. With the judge's knuckles whitening around his gavel, the psychological war escalates beyond symbols to become a battle of words designed to wound. Behind those medals on Harrison's chest lies a story Judge Thornton seems determined to mock, yet unprepared to hear. a clash of different philosophies of power and service. The silence following Thornton's opening salvo hangs heavily in Courtroom 7. Harrison stands at attention, scarlet uniform contrasting with the black robe surrounding him. His expression remains impassive, discipline forged through countless hours standing guard while tourists attempt to provoke reactions. "I asked you a question about your costume, Lieutenant," Thornton says, contempt dripping from his words. "Or does your training not extend to basic courtroom etiquette?" Jurors shift uncomfortably. The court reporter's fingers hover above her stenotype machine, eyes darting between judge and soldier as if witnessing a collision in slow motion. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interjects, alarm in her voice, "if we might return to the witness testimony." "I will decide what matters in my courtroom," Thornton snaps. "And right now what matters is understanding why we're being treated to this theatrical display during proceedings." The prosecutor's lips press into a thin line as she sits. In the gallery, a paralegal documents what has veered beyond judicial propriety. Two elderly gentlemen with veterans' pins watch intently from the back row. "Tell me, Lieutenant," Thornton continues, leaning forward, "does your training include anything beyond marching and standing motionless?" Murmurs sweep the courtroom. Harrison's posture remains unchanged, but his voice carries the precision of someone accustomed to being heard across parade grounds. "My training includes tactical and strategic education, sir, as well as legal familiarization with the Military Justice Act and jurisdictional boundaries." This measured response aggravates Thornton. A vein pulses at his temple as color rises from his collar. Harrison neither acknowledges insults nor challenges authority. He simply corrects misunderstandings. "And you think that makes you special? Standing around while tourists take photos hardly qualifies as service to the Crown." The defense attorney attempts intervention. "Your Honor, I must object." Objection overruled. Thornton cuts in. "The witness will answer about his qualifications." Harrison speaks with quiet dignity. "The Queen's Guard is selected from soldiers with exemplary service records, many with combat experience." Thornton's eyes narrow. Most witnesses would be flustered by now. Harrison remains composed, his discipline providing armor against the assault. "And these decorations?" Thornton gestures toward the medals. "For standing still, I presume?" The courtroom falls silent. The court artist's pencil pauses above her sketch pad. The Distinguished Service Cross was for evacuating 16 civilians from a collapsed embassy under sniper fire in Kabul, Harrison states. The Queen's Gallantry Medal was for disarming an explosive device near a primary school with 347 children inside. Thornton's mockery has transformed into a hero's resume. The veterans straighten in their seats, pride evident. Jurors look at Harrison with newfound respect, then back to the judge with disapproval. Thornton's hand trembles as his fingers tighten around the gavel. His face has progressed to crimson, betraying his deteriorating emotional state. The wooden symbol of authority quivers in his grasp, like a weapon rather than a tool of order. Between Thornton's white-knuckled grip and Harrison's composed stance lay a tipping point where symbols would transform into actions, and centuries of courtroom decorum would shatter in an instant. The maple gavel, nearly 2 pounds of polished hardwood, was about to become the physical manifestation of judicial misconduct, a transformation from the symbol of order to the instrument of its undoing. Judge Thornton rose to his full height, the elevated bench amplifying his imposing presence. His position above the courtroom floor, designed to reinforce authority, now served only to magnify his fury. "I have been presiding in this courtroom for longer than you've been alive," Thornton hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous register that caused several jurors to shift uncomfortably. Harrison maintained his military bearing but shifted his approach. Article 68 acknowledges ceremonial duties serve a vital function in maintaining public trust, Your Honor. His voice remained level, neither challenging nor submissive, simply factual. The court recorder's fingers hesitated over her stenotype. Her eyes darted toward the senior clerk as she carefully documented each word of this remarkable breach of protocol. "Additionally," Harrison continued, his white gloves contrasting with the deep scarlet of his uniform, "perhaps Your Honor might wish to consult the guidelines regarding temperament in court proceedings." The mention of judicial conduct, a direct reference to the standards by which Thornton would be measured, was the catalyst. Thornton's face contorted beyond anger into something primal. The veins at his temples pulsed as he gripped the bench edge. "How dare you stand there in your costume and cite guidelines to me?" The words exploded from him, flecks of spittle landing on his robes. The courtroom fell silent, tension compressing the air itself. In that moment, the gavel transformed in Thornton's perception. Like a comet breaking free of its orbit, it shifted from a ceremonial instrument to a weapon. His fingers closed around the handle, the smooth wood worn from years of use fitting perfectly into his palm. What happened next occurred in less than 5 seconds, though witnesses would later describe it as if time had slowed. Thornton snatched up the gavel, his arm drawing back, pure impulse overtaking decades of judicial training, and hurled the wooden projectile directly at Harrison. The gavel rotated through the air, its polished head catching the fluorescent light as it traveled the 20 feet between them. Judicial misconduct was no longer an abstract concept, but a physical reality arcing through space. Harrison's military training activated instantly. The Queen's Guard's rigorous drills had conditioned his body to respond before conscious thought could intervene. Though formal and still just moments before, Harrison's hand shot up with fluid precision. The sound that filled the courtroom wasn't the expected impact of wood against flesh, but rather the decisive slap of hardwood meeting leather as the gavel landed squarely in Harrison's white-gloved palm. He caught it cleanly, his arm absorbing the momentum, his expression unchanged. The psychological impact rippled through the courtroom. The collective intake of breath created a vacuum of sound, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Harrison stood perfectly still, the judge's gavel now firmly in his possession. The white glove wrapped around the dark wood created a visual that no one present would ever forget. Authority made manifest in a single, stunning moment. No one moved. No one spoke. The attorneys remained frozen, unable to process the unprecedented breach they had witnessed. Thornton himself seemed suddenly deflated, as if the trajectory of the gavel had carried with it his very sense of identity. In that profound silence, power had not merely shifted, it had been caught mid-air. Power caught mid-air must eventually land somewhere, and in a courtroom, it finds its rightful place in the law itself. Those 27 seconds of silence following Harrison's catch weighed heavier than the gavel in his white-gloved hand. No one moved. No one spoke. The suspended moment crystallized into something permanent, a physical manifestation of authority transferred. Harrison lowered the gavel slightly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the stillness. That was assault on a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, a criminal offense under Section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act. His words came as matter of fact, the statute applied with precision rather than emotion. With deliberate movements, Harrison removed his bearskin cap for the first time since entering Courtroom 7. The ceremonial headpiece that had marked him as decorative now rested under his arm, revealing close-cropped dark hair. Without the iconic cap, the man beneath the uniform emerged. A legal mind with combat-tested resolve. From the gallery, 2 elderly gentlemen rose in perfect synchronicity. The first spoke with naval precision. Commander William Hastings, Royal Navy, retired. "I witnessed the assault and am prepared to provide a formal statement." Beside him, the second man stood ramrod straight. "Colonel James Rutherford, formerly of the Royal Marines. I, too, bear witness to this violation of conduct and law." Court security officers shifted uncomfortably. Their training covered disruptions from spectators, lawyers, even defendants, but never from the bench itself. They moved hesitantly forward, eyes darting between Harrison, the veterans, and Judge Thornton, whose rage had transformed into approaching fear. Under Section 31 of the Courts Act, Harrison continued, placing the gavel carefully on the evidence table, when a judge commits a criminal offense in open court, normal jurisdictional protections are suspended. The wooden mallet, once a symbol of authority, briefly a weapon, now became evidence through his methodical handling. The door swung open as Judge Elizabeth Chamberlain, Chief Magistrate, entered and strode directly to the court recorder. She leaned over, scanning the transcript with increasing gravity. Harrison addressed the room. The court recorder's transcript serves as primary evidence in judicial misconduct cases and will form the basis of proceedings. The statement hung in the air, simple, factual, devastating in its implications. The Chief Magistrate straightened, her expression carved from stone. Her eyes moved from the transcript to the gavel on the evidence table, then to Thornton, who seemed to have aged a decade in minutes. Consequences for misconduct while holding judicial office include permanent disbarment, Harrison added with detached clarity, the statute clearly studied long before this moment. The Chief Magistrate cleared her throat, the sound cutting through the charged atmosphere. Security, please escort Judge Thornton to my chambers. He is relieved of his duties pending a full investigation. Her authority carried the unmistakable weight of ethical service. Thornton's hands gripped the bench as security approached. The man who had towered over proceedings physically diminished, shoulders curving inward, chest concaving, eyes flickering with the dawning reality of consequences. A court officer approached with an evidence bag, carefully placing the gavel inside before sealing and labeling it. Another officer photographed it from multiple angles, documenting the object with the clinical care afforded to any weapon in an assault case. As Thornton was led from the courtroom, his eyes locked briefly with Harrison's. The exchange contained no words, no visible emotion, just the silent acknowledgement that beneath the trappings of authority, whether ceremonial uniform or judicial robe, ultimately stood only the integrity of the person wearing them. As the courthouse returned to its normal rhythms that afternoon, the essence of true authority had been laid bare. That wooden gavel's transformation, from judicial instrument to projectile to evidence, revealed a profound truth about power. Lieutenant Blackwood stood at his post with quiet dignity, the morning's confrontation processed and compartmentalized within him. The contrast couldn't be clearer. A judge stripped of authority when his composure collapsed versus a soldier whose power emanated from within. What separated them wasn't rank or position, but an understanding that genuine authority stems from self-discipline rather than symbols. The gavel lay in evidence, while Blackwood's unwavering presence continued to command respect. In the end, true power wasn't conferred by robes or wooden instruments, but earned through integrity and the steadfast upholding of justice.